Good morning. Welcome to today's Better Together webinar. We're here in San Francisco and Oakland and crossing the East Coast. So good afternoon to everybody on the East Coast with us and across Europe. For those of you who've joined us in previous sessions, welcome back. For those joining for the first time, we're delighted you're here with us today and hope you're healthy and well. My name is Claire Murphy. I'm Director of Customer Success here at Great Place to Work. And I'm here to facilitate our time together and to pose any questions you have to our panel on your behalf. Let's start with the why. So this is ours. Great Place to Work is focused on building great workplaces for everyone. We've helped workplaces in over 90 different countries and have been studying them for over 30 years, including through the past 2 recessions. We've learned a lot over that time, but these times, though, are truly unprecedented. Our mission right now unites us all, and it means more than ever today. So thank you for joining us and being part of our community. A little bit about the Together webinars. We're all in this COVID crisis together, so a collective crisis requires a collective solutions. We started these weekly gatherings as a learning space to help you to address challenges and issues that are affecting you and your businesses during these uncertain times, and provide a space where you could learn from our research and insights and and what will be helpful from our leaders in best workplaces. Please feel free to chat your questions in the chat box on the right at any time. We have a great lineup today, so we want to make sure we can get to your questions and answer as many of those as we can. We'll be recording the sessions and we'll be sending the recordings and slides to attendees within the next 48 hours. So without further ado, in the world of uncertainty, everybody's leaning on their leaders. So I'm going to turn it over to our leader, CEO Michael Bush. Over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Claire. And I'm really excited about today because we're going to be able to give some great information to everybody, all of you who have joined us on the webinar. So just as a starting place, I just want to kind of use an illustration to show really where we are. And this is, just 2 months ago, pre-COVID, doing business, and for everybody, business was great. Things were looking up, and 2020 was just going to be a remarkable year. And then something happened. The virus came, and we slid down, and to the point of, okay, is this going to lead to a recession or not? We're all knowing yes is the answer. And so we're down at the bottom, and we've got diagrammed here kind of a V-shaped recovery, which I don't think has ever happened in history, but it's the most optimistic way for us to look forward. This belief that we can work together in a certain way and get our companies back to a position of strength, help other companies do the same thing, and get back to having an economy that's thriving all around the world. And what we know at Great Place to Work is there's a way to do it. So that as companies have done in the past, the way that we treat our people, the way that we lead, the way that we communicate, the way that we treat our communities, companies that do that well outperform those financially who don't do it well. So the little pinkish space is the difference between great companies, and we'll be talking to a CEO from a great company today, and how they will recover based on the way that they lead, and then companies who don't do that. So this is just a way for us to share information so that we get our companies back in the strongest position possible. And today we have with us the CEO from Synchrony, Margaret Keane, who you can see on the screen with me. And over the past few weeks, we've been talking about the things that you have asked us to talk about: communication, leadership, people, flexibility, agility, adaptability, connection, a series of things. We've shared with you the best practices, and now we have Margaret, who will talk to us about what they've done at Synchrony to make sure that the experience has been as safe as it can be for all of the employees, as comforting as employees are working together in a completely different way. So Margaret, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Look forward to it. Now today, I think we're about 2,500 miles apart, so we're certainly meeting the social distancing guidelines.
For sure.
So thank you very much. And I think a good place to start, just Synchrony, some amazing numbers: $150 billion of sales financed through Synchrony, 75.5 million accounts that you manage all around the world. These are just remarkable numbers. And if you could just take a moment to let people know what Synchrony does, how you do it, so that we have that fitting in that context as we go forward.
So we are a credit card finance company who really works through third parties, so mostly retailers, both big and small. So in our retail card business, you'll know many of the big names, Lowe's, Amazon, PayPal, folks like that. And then we have a business called Payment Solutions, which is really made up of 200 smaller merchants where we do promotional financing, usually bigger ticket items, things related a lot to verticals like home, sports equipment, things like that. And then we have a business called Care Credit, which is a healthcare financing business that started out predominantly financing things for dentists, but has really expanded pretty much now into a lot of new verticals. Vet is one. We bought a pet insurance, so it's a business that really is more through the partner. So it's like a B2B to C business. So I think when we talk about the things we have to worry about, it's not only the end customer, but we're really in the small business space with a lot of our partners and merchants. And, obviously that's a group of people right now that are really feeling a lot of pain through this crisis.
Okay. And you've got about 16,500 employees, something like that?
Something like that.
Okay. And operating in how many countries?
We operate in 3 countries, US, Philippines, and India.
Okay. All right. So that's the background. Big company doing big things, huge companies as customers, and small companies, the job creators as well. So your role in that is vitally important. And business was just humming along. Everything was going great. And then something happened, and here we are. And so can you explain to us, just your personal experience of that transition from things going great to all of a sudden something happened, and what did you do kind of at ground zero to try and address this in a way that was best for the people of Synchrony?
Michael, you and I were, I think about this, I think it was March 5th, we were out in San Francisco together, and I came back from that event. And, one of the first decisions we made, and I'm not sure how we knew to make this decision, but it really was driven a little bit because we have an office up in Seattle, and that was really the biggest first hotspot. We closed that office right away, but then we kind of sat together and said, should we really have people who are commuting coming into our offices? So we made a decision right coming out of me coming back from San Francisco that anyone who's on public transportation, we're not going to have them come into our offices. I don't think we realized, particularly if you're reading anything about the New York area and what's happened, a lot of it has been driven back to the subway system and public transportation. But then, I started thinking through, how do we get the organization home? And I think we started out, the easy decision was, any of our exempt workforce is easy, right? They go home, they have their laptop, they can do their job. The real pain and decisioning was around our call center. So we had, about round numbers, let's say, 9,000, 10,000 call center folks around the world, by the way, that we had to try to figure out how to get home. Now, the good news was we did have some work at home, but here's where I think the decisioning of my team and us really made a difference. At first we were trying to do all the right, temperature checks. We had the floors being cleaned, and but I just, we had people who were at high risk. We sent those home and said, go work from home, and don't worry if you can't work from home, we're going to pay you. We did all those right things, but I just knew we couldn't run the operation like that, because every other day we were getting, we had someone who tested positive here, we have to close the floor over here. And then we just said, look, we got to figure out a way to get everybody home. And we jumped on this very early. And the reason that making that decision was so critical, because we had the equipment, literally, we had the equipment, because we had to literally give every single call center rep a package with headsets, their equipment, to go home with. And we did that, by the way, around the world, which was quite incredible. And what I would say, the things that I think are really important, and we do this in crisis sometimes, right? You make a decision and you get out of the way as the CEO and let the experts do the job. And then all you're really doing as the CEO is just making sure you're supporting everyone. Like, what do you need? How can I help? But don't be the person that's asking 100 questions, right? You make these decisions, you got to be decisive and you got to go. And you know what I keep saying, that decision of sending our whole organization home, we have regulators that we have data, customer data we got to worry about, cybersecurity we got to worry about. You know, we have a lot of burden on us in terms of things that we had to consider. And, you know, my team did just an enormous job. And I keep talking about how does that change us going forward, because normally those decisions we would have had, I don't even know how many meetings, PowerPoint slides, you know, questioning, whatever. You know, we didn't talk about cost. We didn't talk about, we're like go. And I think it turned out to be, because we made the decision early, it allowed us to stabilize our operation pretty fast. And most importantly, take care of our employees.
Well, you know, Margaret, the number one, you know, you're in the financial services industry. It's not one that's known for putting people first, you know, as an industry, and so I think that's worth noting. The other thing is you're talking about 16,500 people, many of whom are in a call center, and there are many other companies in that situation who didn't do what you did. And so I know that if you probably look, you do the analysis on an Excel spreadsheet, it probably says don't do what you did. So what's that moment where you're looking at millions of dollars of impact, as well as impact on your customers as a result of the transition? How did you make that decision so quickly? Again, you know, normally it would be a year of discussion.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I'm going to tell you how I made it, and it has nothing to do with my company. Actually, I actually sit on a university board, St. John's University. After I came back from I actually went to a board meeting there, and I was watching through this particular day where just a lot of things were happening. It's in New York City, by the way. The university is in New York City. It's in Queens. You know, they started talking about all the decisions they were making, and they were making incremental decisions, like, oh, we had to bring our students back from Europe. Oh, we think we're going to go 2 weeks online training. Then, like, within 2 days of that meeting, they ended up, oh no, we're going to still have the athletes come to campus. The next day, 3 athletes, lacrosse, got the virus. And like, no, but we're going to keep the campus open. 2 days later, you know, a professor had it, this one, and I just sat there and said, you know what, you cannot make incremental decisions here. This thing is going to get away from you so fast. So when we said initially, we're going to work from home, I did this March 10th, around that time frame. I said, we're going to be home till April 30th. And people were shocked that I said April 30th. But I said, look, let's put it out there, April 30th, and if it's earlier, you know, we're already at May 31st right now, and we'll talk a little bit about how we're going to bring folks back. But I think by making that bold decision and putting it out there, we focused then on getting everybody home, and we were able to stabilize the operation. But I knew this wasn't an incremental decision type of thing, particularly as you're trying to run an operation and take care of the employees. The piece that I think is different here than anything I've ever dealt with, there is enormous stress at a personal, family, professional, like almost every level of a person's day-to-day existence has been impacted in some way, right? And there's a lot of fear out there. And I think by just saying, we're going to take care of you guys, go home, we're going to figure this out, it's not going to be perfect. I can't tell you the amount of emails I've gotten from employees on the fact that we said, we're going to make you safe. And that's where we started.
Yeah. So, well, let's talk about what you know, the employees, what they've been going through, which everybody on the webinar has similar experiences. We're all experiencing the same thing, but differently. Depending on our personal situation. So let's talk about mental health and what have you learned and what kinds of things have you done? And as you look forward, what kinds of things are you doing to take care of each employee?
Yeah, so I do think this mental health aspect is just very big. And we were looking at this, we talked a little bit about this at the Great Places to Work event, where we were testing some wellness coaches in some of our sites. And so I immediately realized that we have to make sure we're taking care of the employees at home. And so we've done a couple of things. We've expanded the ability for our whole organization to do psychological appointments. We've expanded all that capability. We've done a series of events where we've had first of all, every week we do a call with an infectious disease doctor who allows them to answer, who answers all their questions. By the way, these questions, you can get the answers in a lot of places. We're getting anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 people on these calls every week, which again just tells me people are looking for answers. Now the questions change. Like this week, a lot of it was around the fact that states are open up. What does that mean? What does it mean for my family? We allow them to have their families on the call. So we have anyone can ask a question kind of thing. And we've actually interspersed in some of those sessions a psychologist to deal with different topics. So it could be a topic of, how do you manage your team who's home? How do you as a leader manage your team? Because call centers, we have folks at home, they have team leaders. How do you manage your team? How do you ask, what are the right questions to ask on how, like, don't just ask how you're feeling today, right? What are the other questions you might want to ask to just get a better feeling? Things around dealing with work at home and your child. How do you answer questions for your child? And then we put together a whole series of videos of a person that we work with over here in Yale who did these 10-minute little vignette videos that address different topics. We know that this is now becoming, I think, a little hotter topic as people are home longer. And it's one that we're continuing to reinforce. We just sent a note out to the entire organization today talking about this, and we've actually asked our leaders to actually spend some time on their calls talking about it, because I think we have to talk about it. It's not just sending stuff out, you have to talk about it.
So you're talking about communication.
Yes.
and information. So you've taken a really an aggressive step forward to make sure people can get expert information about healthcare, about the virus, about the things that they should be thinking about. So and you've opened it up for all, for the employees as well as their families. Those are bold steps. And then, so one of the things we talked about in these webinars is companies having a responsibility now that's much greater than it was just 2 months ago. Number one, getting their people information, and also finding ways to get people money. So can you talk a little about what you changed, what's different around communication, the dissemination of information, access for all, and money?
Yeah, sure. So I think I think you can never over communicate. This is the one thing I would tell you. I'm always surprised because I think we're communicating enough, and then we're like, well, we're still not communicating enough. So you really have to do this in a couple of different ways. There's written communication. We have a COVID website that people can go on and get their personal questions answered. We have, I'm doing what we're calling with my leadership team, Ask Us Anything webinar, if you will, every single week, where people could pretty much ask us anything. And they're nervous about everything. Like they're nervous about the virus, they're nervous about their family, they're worried about our like what's going to happen to our company. Is our company safe? Our stock price drop. What does that mean? Do we have enough cash? You have to be able to answer all these questions and keep everyone very confident, right? And the first one we did just voice, and then I said to the team, I'm like, no, we got to do video, because I think people have to see us. I think it's really important people can see you and see your face as a leader, and being calm and just being hopeful, I think, is really important. So you have to lay out facts and say, here's the challenges we're facing, but at the same time, you really want to be that person that lifts the group up and is hopeful. And so we've done a series of events like that. Each of our senior leadership are holding their own events. I've done something that's been fun. We're using Teams as one of the tools, and I just have arbitrarily started just calling people out of the blue, which has kind of freaked a lot of them out, by the way. But just to check in, hey, how you doing? In some cases there were some family situations where people, had COVID, and I just called to say, how are your in-laws doing? Do you need anything? In other cases, I called to just, thank people who have done just incredible work. So, I think I always say thank you is not enough, but I think those personal touches and reach outs and people being recognized for the fact that we know they're going above and beyond or is really important. So we've been doing that from every aspect. That's the communication. We gave our reps $500 if full-time, $250 part-time, right out of the gate. We said, look, we know you're working, you're on the front line. You know, I think with our call center reps, you know, they're dealing with customers who are stressed on the other side. Most of the calls we're getting right now are people who are saying, can I defer my payments? You know, I lost my job. And so you're hearing that all day. It's stressful for our reps when they're dealing with it. And in many cases, some of our reps' spouses have lost their jobs, you know, so we got that challenge. So I think we gave them some extra money. And then we also, like when the checks were coming out, we wanted to make sure people were thoughtful about the check. So we really communicated a lot about how the check was going to come. You should make sure you can get it ACH versus a check. We kind of communicated all that to them. And then we did some financial planning aspects with them so they could think about how to use that money. So we've been trying to think of, you know, health and safety, financial wellness, mental wellness, and taking care of the whole person as well as the whole family, if that makes sense.
That's amazing. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. Kudos to you and your team. And one of the things we know we're learning a lot about mental health and about stresses and about people who are teaching their kids while doing work and these complexities that are new. For a few days, it seems to be fun. And then after that, it's less fun. But we know that people need something to do. Helps people with their mental health. People need something to care about, and people or things, animals to care about, and something to hope for. So I think you mentioned some of those things in terms of, look, this is reality, but Synchrony is going to be fine. And these are the kinds of things that we're doing to give people that. And is there anything, you know, in how do you do it for you? You know, for Margaret, you know, is there anything personally you're looking forward to, you know, in 2021 or something as you look out that just kind of helps you, you know, have a connection to normal life and something that's inspiring for you to keep you going since you're giving all day?
So I think there's two really fun things, I think. One is, like, I'm excited about like this in a weird way. You know, I look at our business, which started in the Depression. You know, GE came up with the idea of financing appliances during the Depression. That's how the company started, which is an incredible start when you think about the roots of the company. And so in some ways, I'm excited about the things the teams have now are accelerating on from a technology perspective and how we've made these really, like, we redid our strategic plan in like 9 days. I'm telling you, we would never have been able to do this. And it's really exciting. We've moved resources around. And the way we've broken up the team is folks really focused on the operation to keep everything stable. And then we've taken a whole bunch of leaders and said, okay, what do we look like midterm? What do we look like long-term? So that we have a whole series of events going on in terms of how this company can be different when we come out of this. That's exciting. I think the second thing that's really exciting, and this is always as a leader, I think so refreshing, is when you see these people who you kind of knew were superstars, but maybe didn't really have a chance to bloom, and they're just stepping up and blooming like crazy. And I think, you know, all of us as leaders really need to pay attention to those folks, because when you think about the financial crisis, it was 10 years ago, which was a long time ago, actually. And a lot of our leaders now may have been working as individual contributors during that crisis, but not leading during the crisis. And so, you know, a lot of what I keep talking when I go out to different groups is, look, you will learn more. You will refer back to this experience for the rest of your life and your career, because it's in these environments that you learn so much about yourself as a leader and your ability to drive change and move. And, you know, so I love watching that happen. So that really inspires me a lot. You know, I think for myself, you know, I have a very big family. I have a lot of my family, by the way, is frontline folks in New York City that are police officers and firemen and nurses. So I have, you know, I have real life experiences here. So I've been reaching out to them and touching base with them. I'm buying cupcakes and food for nurse floors and trying to do all those. That stuff keeps me going. Just being able to give back and touching base and knowing that, I'm pretty proud of my family and my family being on the front lines, because it's not easy.
What do you, as you think about the going forward at Synchrony, and Synchrony is now, I know one of the things we talked about is how you're working with some of your partners in order to help right now, people with PPEs. Can you talk a little bit about that, about the Better for the World part of your mission?
Well, this was exciting. I think, one of the things very early on we talked about was one of our values is caring. So we have a very caring culture. As a matter of fact, this is how caring we are. In one of our first meetings we had, before we sent everybody home in the call center, one of the questions was, we like to bring in lunch and we share our lunches. Should we still share our lunches? I was like, oh, no sharing lunches. That's the kind of caring community we have at Synchrony. But I knew that we had to figure out how do we take some of this energy that we usually have in the office and figure out how to give back. And so we did a couple of things. So first is, believe it or not, we finance most of the big sewing machines in the country. So we had this whole sewing community with our partners. So we went out to that sewing community and created an initiative called Gear Up. And we now have people across the country making masks, making gowns, making things and sending them in. We've set a location where they can send it all in, and we're shipping it to the areas that have a need, and we have a whole process around that. We found out we had one person who had been able to make one of those, the plastic masks from the 3D printer. So now we have a whole group of people doing that, and they shared their designs with each other. And then in our care credit business, which deals with a lot of dentists, vets, plastic surgeons, a lot of that was stopped. So we coordinated with them to get their masks and their capabilities and bring it to the hospitals in the local areas. So it's really allowed us to take the energy, and people are sharing what they're making, and it's a whole community that's been developed through this, and it's our employees, it's our customers. We've really engaged the whole community to make that happen, which I think is really great. And then, of course, Synchrony donated $5 million. We're focused on food because I think, as you know, food is turning out to be a very challenging thing. And, we're going to continue to make sure we're doing that. So, I think it's another way to take something that's a negative and really turn it into a positive. And again, back to this hope and giving back concept, I think is really big.
Okay. And just one more question before we open it up to our audience. As you think about reentry, as you think about the road back to the new normal, if you will, all these office spaces that we have that are empty right now that we'll begin to move back into, how are you and your team thinking about that? Both how are you organizing, how are you involving people in that discussion to assure that the care is extended over the next 3, 6, 9 months? And is there any key piece of information or something that you're hoping for in the world that'll let us know we can breathe a little bit easier?
Vaccine. I'm really hopeful for the vaccine. Okay. But I thought long term here, and I told our team that we have to look a year out. So just look a year out. And this we started as March. I'm like, look at next March, and we got to work our way back. Let's assume we get the vaccine by March, which I know is a big stretch and very hopeful, right? So we got to really work on that. So what we're trying to do is I put together a team of a whole bunch of functional experts across the business. And we have metrics, processes, we put together a whole list of things we want in place. We know we're going to start with volunteers first back to the office. We're going to go slow. The good news is, as I keep telling everyone, there's no rush now. We're all at home, we're safe, and we can really do this in a methodical way. I think the other thing we're trying to figure out is, what does work look like after this? Do we all do 100% come back? I'm not so sure. And so we have another team really looking at the workforce of the future and what that should look like.
Okay.
So we got a whole series of things. But I think to me, there's two things. Having a therapeutic that works should someone get the virus. And then the vaccine, I think, is the other big piece.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Margaret. Well, Claire, I know we've got some questions. I can see a little activity. So we'll bring you in now and let our audience ask Margaret whatever they'd like.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Margaret, for such inspirational content, actually, for today. It's been great. And just to let you know, there is a lot of compliments that are coming in, and shout outs to say hello, people who seem to actually know you. So from all across the world. So just to let you know that they're there, and we'll pass them on. Following on from the question that you just answered, there was a lot of questions actually about, plans for transitioning back. So I think the only additional piece that I would ask is there's some questions about, as you think about people who are at risk or in at-risk categories, and what are your thoughts around how you might bring those back into the workforce, those people?
Yeah, I think we've already, it's funny. The at-risk populations are funny, because what happened was when we first said, let's get everyone at home, we went to the at-risk population. And, people had to tell us they were at risk. So there's a little, you have to say you are. We told all the at-risk people, or if they had someone at home that was at risk, because sometimes it expands beyond the person, right? Just go home. We had about 80 people who didn't want to go home. They're like, I want to stay at work. I want to come to work. And we let them come to work. We said, okay, but then, obviously everyone went home. We will not require people at risk to come into the office. I mean, unless we get the vaccine and they're safe. I think we have to be very thoughtful about that. We've seen enough of what happens when people are at risk. And I think it's something you wouldn't even want to, think about. You want them to be safe. So we would just continue having them work at home for as long as they needed to.
Great, thank you. Another big topic that's coming in is generally around, so there was questions about, Zoom fatigue and, fatigue generally in terms of we're about 8 weeks in, depending on where you are in the world. So, people are getting tired, where it's getting hard to keep moving. How do you deal with that in Synchrony?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Actually, I think we've been at it a long time, and I think everyone thought by now we'd be back at work, actually. So we now have a fund committee who's working on some things we could do over the summer, in particular, like events maybe in the Friday afternoons to kind of give people breaks. We've done a lot of, each of the functions have done like these various little contests. We're actually probably thinking about doing something where we don't do Zoom or any of those meetings on a Friday afternoon in the summer, as an example. So trying to figure out ways. So there's a team kind of looking at different things we can do. I'm always cognizant of the fact that, we have groups of people, and we want to make sure we're doing something for everyone in the group, not just, so we got to think about our call center reps and how we're going to give them a break too. So there's a team actually working on that right now, because I think we've probably hit that. As a matter of fact, it hit me last night. I've been doing this the whole time, and last night we had a call at 6:30, and it was like a really hard topic, and I just said, you know what, I'm tired, guys. I can't do this topic right now. I'm just exhausted, because I literally staring at the computer all day, and it was just, you hit a wall. So I think we all have to. The other thing we're really encouraging is health, in terms of walking, getting outside, taking breaks. We just talked today on our call of people role modeling that I'm not going to be, because, the other big question, everyone's like, should I take vacation? We're like, yeah. So I know might not be going anywhere, but you can go in your backyard and have a vacation. So I talked to my team today to say, we as leaders have to role model this. We actually have to say, I'm taking the afternoon off, and I'm not going to be, to make sure people feel comfortable doing that, right? Because I think there's this weird thing happening now where everyone feels like they got to be online, and if they're not online, so we got to lead through that, and I think we have to be role models to help people do that.
Great, that's an awesome answer. I think that resonates with many of us on the call today, personally and as leaders. So for sure. And another question was, when you think about right now, in these tough times, some leaders can find it strange or maybe inappropriate to celebrate or recognize people. Do you feel like that's a true statement? Like, what's your approach to like reward and recognition in the current climate?
I'm a big rewarder. People have gone, I mean, I cannot tell you above and beyond. I've had employees who literally like became personal friends with the FedEx guy because we were trying to get equipment. They were meeting them on highways to get the equipment. I had someone who drove 2 hours to get these headsets off a truck. The work and effort that people have put into getting us where we are, you definitely have to celebrate. You definitely have to recognize those employees, and you got to take care of them and recognize them for what they did. And I mentioned earlier, I've actually called pretty deep into my organization. So when they're seeing almost everyone thinks I dialed their number by mistake. And I'm like, no, I'm actually calling you. And, it's a simple thing to do. And it's just, I think people feel good that they know that their hard work is being recognized. And you can do it through money and rewards. We have something called Synchrony Stars. So we have a thing that we use all the time. So we're using those. But, sometimes it's just that, hey, I want you to know as the CEO, I know you're doing great work and you're stepping up. And that's a big message to someone.
For sure. It's also terrifying to think that your CEO is calling you on Zoom. Michael, I would be
with video, because on Teams you can do the video, because I want him to see me. So
I'm actually going to ask this question verbatim because it's a really nice one. Margaret, you're known as a leader who embraces trust within your organization. Can you please talk about how trust is developed amongst your team in the new work environment?
Yeah, this is, I think of you often, Michael, with this word, because if you ask me, the biggest positive that's come out of this is this whole, we've empowered the people to do the work. And to empower people, you have to trust them, right? It gets to this point of get out of their way, let the best people rise to the occasion, and guess what? They'll never let you down. And when you give people that trust, guess what? They raise the bar for themselves. And so I think the biggest lesson for all of us in this is we have moved organizations like way beyond anything we ever could have thought. And we did it because we empowered the people to do it. And that's where trust really becomes, I think, just so powerful. And you know what? People love when they're successful at doing things. So, if you empower someone, trust them, and they hit the ball in the park, guess what? That's a really happy employee. And I think this is probably, in my opinion, one of the biggest things that I feel has come out of what we've been able to do over the last 8 weeks.
Great.
Margaret, one of our first webinars, we had a CEO on, and he sent a question in saying, we really don't have a high trust culture. We're now working remotely. What can we do to create a high trust culture? And I was like, prayer and incense. I mean, it's like too late now. This is not the time that you're going to be able to make it happen. And then I got a whole bunch of heat on Twitter. You shouldn't have said that, but I didn't know what else to say. I mean, when you don't have any trust and you distribute and still expect people to take care of their families and their customers, I mean, so this is, it's a true competitive advantage, always has been, and now it just blossoms because of the work and the care that you build, and that's why you're sitting where you're sitting, delivering what you're delivering. And we have a lot of people on the webinar the same way. We kind of know this, but some people are coming to it late. One thing that I wanted to ask about, because I know the work that you do around diversity and inclusion, that you know and assert that it drives innovation. You've been saying that throughout your tenure. You've got a very active ERG community, and so what's happening there? Are you tapping into that, using that, and how do you know that you're making sure it's a never-ending hunt, that everybody feels cared for and that they're being communicated with?
It's a great question. I think two things. One, we're lucky in that we have our networks. We have our diversity networks, and I think we're working with each of those networks to, one, like, the African American and Hispanic community who's been hard hit by this particular virus. We've reached out to them to do some health specific things to that community, which I think is important. I think the other piece is we're doing a double down on diversity in general. I think when I was with you out in San Francisco, we talked about the fact we want to continue to make more progress on Hispanics and African community in terms of leadership. We're actually like double downing on this and not letting us lose sight, because I think, look, organizations are going to get smaller. We want to make sure that we're not losing sight of really changing the face of our company and what we plan to set out for 2020. I just had a meeting this week with DJ, who to go through who are the top talent, what are we going to do, how do we get them in jobs, and I think that's another big piece of not losing sight of the goals that you had at the beginning of the year, because it's easy to just fall backwards and say, oh, we got the pandemic. We can't do that. we can't. We got to do it all. So I think that's an important element as we're trying to change the face of our company, to not lose sight of that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Margaret. A question about your own personal stance on leadership. So again, verbatim, your attitude is the opposite of scarcity and the opposite of fear. How did you develop this attitude, and how do you maintain it in challenging times?
I think it really was how I started out. I started out where fear was kind of the way people led, and I always hated it. I always felt it was very destructive. And I've always, I really always hated that person that wanted to be the smartest person in the room and make everyone feel stupid. And everyone knows some of those people. And, as I work my way up, I just always tried to be respectful and thoughtful. And I think anyone who comes into the office and sits at the table has something to give. And how do you unleash that? And so I've always tried to be thoughtful. I had some very tough leaders I worked with in my life through tough situations. And when something bad happens, that's when you as a leader have to be the calmest. And when people make mistakes, you have to be calm, because believe me, great people are going to feel so much worse about that mistake than you are. And they're going to make it feel like it's so much bigger than they are. And so you have to almost like bring it down a step and then just talk about, okay, what did we learn from that? And I guess that's not going to happen again, and try to get everyone to be calm. And I think just treating people thoughtfully and with respect, no matter who they are, by the way, whether it's the person who cleans in the building or the maintenance guy outside or the guy in the cafeteria or our call center reps, or all of these people are here to do a job and should all be treated with the greatest respect. And that's just how I've always led and will always lead. I don't, I kind of treat people the same no matter who they are.
Great answer. Thank you. And I suppose a follow on from that, there's a number of questions about, you've had some great messages that you've been communicating to the organization. How do you support, the leaders, the levels below you to be effective in continuing to share those messages and communicate, those kind of sentiments of being calm and hopeful?
Well, we do support them a lot with a lot of talking points that they could bring out to their team. But I think we're also doing a lot more online training around. We have a whole series now we just put together of how to lead virtually and helping all levels of the organization figure out how to communicate, how to lead, how to connect. Now, we did have a little bit of an advantage because we did have about 800 call center reps that were already at home working from home. So we had some of that example. We're just now accelerating that training and some of the things we developed for that group across the company. But I think you have to have tools and toolkits. You can't just leave everyone out there on their own. And again, no matter how much you think you're communicating, you just got to keep communicating it more, and in lots of different ways, whether it's email. And, we got to be thoughtful. We don't want to overwhelm them with email, but you got to have email, you have to have a site they can go to, and then the leaders have to be available and communicating this at their particular staff and various levels within the organization. And so we're hoping that's happening. We're going to be doing some surveys to kind of get a little bit of feel for how people are feeling right now. I know we're participating, Michael, in the short Great Place to Work one, but we actually have some other things going on just to see what else should we be thinking about. Are we hitting the right spots? So trying to get a little bit of employee feedback to make sure we're hitting everything in the right way.
Great, fantastic. In terms of the, keeping, one of the things you actually talked about was making decisions quickly and being very decisive in the beginning, standing out of the way, and letting your people to sort of get on with it. And what's some of the guiding principles? So there's a lot of questions that are coming in, about your COVID response and how you're doing it. But I think overall, like, what are the guiding principles that you sort of impart to your team and to make sure that you can make those decisions as quickly as the organization needs?
Yeah, so, I first of all, I've been around a long time, so I've seen different crises, and that always helps because you have experience from the last one that you pull on. I would say I would have never thought in my entire life I would be leading through a pandemic. This is something unprecedented even for myself. But I think the first thing you have to have is you have to have the team around you that you rely on and trust. Because if you're first of all, if you're a CEO and think you know it all, you don't. There's no possible way you could, because you have experts around you that bring different things to the table. And that's where it gets back to this empowering and trusting. And so I think I set the stage, right? Because I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. How are we going to do it? And then got out of the way, trusting my team to get it done. And they did. I think they know that I trust them. So, and if there's areas where it's this whole making sure you have the right level of communication at your level, your team, and the team underneath that, right? Because it's a lot of people involved in this. And just making sure that they feel you're going to have their back, because look, I gotta be honest, we didn't know how some of this was going to work. And, we ran into some bumps along the way. It wasn't all like, oh, we flipped a finger and everything was snapped our finger and everything went perfect. We learned some things along the way. But look, you got to have your leaders back because we're making bold moves. And I think if you do that and they feel that you have their back, they're gonna keep moving forward.
Great, fantastic. And you mentioned that you're surveying employees and asking people how they're doing and where they're at. One of the questions I see here is what are the deeper questions you want to ask to truly understand how people are doing in this unique situation? I suppose if we were to ask you, what are, like, say, 2 questions that are on your mind, as you think about the employees that you can speak to every day, like, what are the 2 big questions that you would have?
I think the childcare thing is big. So we've given childcare. I think we've answered it for now, but I think we're going to have to answer it for longer. And we got to figure, I think, a plan there. I think childcare is big. We get a lot of questions on it, even though they have support, but I think they're nervous. What happens to summer camp this summer? You know what I mean? I think those types of things. So we're going to have to deal with that. I think the second piece I worry about is, are people particularly feeling comfortable enough to get the help they need if they're dealing with anxiety and depression and that type of situation, right? We have the tools out there. So I think trying to get a little deeper to make sure people know it's okay to ask for help. And I think we just got to do more communication on that, because it's just one of those areas that I think in society we're probably not great at. We talk about it over here, but now it's at work. It's a real thing. And I think we have to be more bold there. So we're talking about that a little more. And so we'll see what comes out of this. But I should add that we also have a daily meeting twice a day. We're probably going to go to once a day now, starting next week, where we kick off in the morning with my whole team, just giving updates on what's happening, what are we hearing, and so for instance, when we do ask us how to go, what do you think folks are still looking for? So every day we're adjusting based on what we're hearing, from that day, and keeping track of how things are going. So, a lot of our discussion now is moving more towards what was asked earlier about what does it look like to come back to work, and how do we think about that?
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose that really leaves us with sort of a final question and move to your final thoughts, Margaret. you know, as you think about the future for Synchrony, you know, what have you learned, you know, that you want, how's the company going to be different or change as a result of this current pandemic?
Yeah, you know, I think a couple of things. I think the company is already different. I think the fact that we have morphed to where we are in terms of working from home, but more importantly, are relooking what's important to our partners and our customers and adjusting even our strategic initiatives around, you know, what are we going to go full speed on? What are we going to slow down? We've had to make some of those decisions just because timing of certain rollouts are not right. I think the one thing that worries me and should worry all of us is, you know, how do we ensure we're doing everything possible for our partners? You know, retail is a tough space right now, and you're all reading the paper, so you know, in tough times is when we as partners have to like really stand tall and make sure we're delivering on every aspect that we possibly can to have them be successful. And so you have the big guys you know about, but we have a lot of small businesses that, you know, I worry about, and we're trying to figure out what are things we can do to help. We're doing different types of seminars for them. We did a seminar for a small business, not that we were the experts in it, but we brought PwC in on how to apply for some of the government CARES Act, because, you know, a lot of these are individual business owners. They're not as sophisticated maybe. So we're always trying to look at ways that we can help our partners, because the reality is, with all said and done, our job is to serve our partners, and we want our partners to be there. So it's the one area that we're continuing to think through, how can we continue to help, maybe even in areas that we normally wouldn't help in, but we're trying to at least provide support.
Great, thank you. Michael, would you like to take it?
Yeah, I think that was my cue. It was like final question, and then Michael, you take us home. So I was so into the, you know, listening to Margaret.
It was very amateur of me, Michael. I should have filled the space better there. See, this is high trust leadership in action right here.
No, you did it perfectly, Claire. You're right on script. I was just listening to Margaret, you know. So, but there was something earlier, Claire. It was when Margaret talked about, you know, reaching out, you know, deep within the organization by video, you know, to an employee who's like, she must be calling me by accident, you know. And you said, God, that would be terrifying to get that call from your CEO. I'm like, terrifying? Claire, what are you saying about me? But anyway, you know, moving off of that, you know, Margaret, I just, you know, you're on many lists. You know, yes, you're on many great place to work lists because of what your company is doing and the way that they care about the employees and the way it comes through in every region where you operate. And you're on these lists around most powerful leaders. And just listening today, it's like powerful's not the right word. There's a different word for what you bring to an organization. And I know what you'll immediately say, it's not me, it's my team. Okay, but that's what great leaders do. They always deflect immediately. But here's the thing: you're running a publicly traded company, a huge one, driving important businesses, large and small. And all you've talked about is people. All you've talked about it, and so you only do that because that's who you are, and the people feel it. Meaning your people feel it, and I know that your customers feel it on the other end of that. And as we all prepare to re-enter, whatever that means, the only way we're going to do it well is if we care for each person. Not groups of people, each person. You know, every one of the 16,500 has to be personally cared for. That only happens from mid-level managers and supervisors. Making decisions right now, fast, just like your business is done, in a way that's caring, which means if you don't have that system built, whereas you say, just get out of the way. Trust your leaders. They're not always going to make the perfect decision. So what? Support them, you know, and keep moving. That's going to be the key to reentry. We can do many things that seem like they're important. It's the one-on-one caring connection between a person who says, you know, between 2 and 4 o'clock, I have to go home because my kids are at home and there's nobody else there, and I need to be there because they haven't seen enough of me and my partner during this week. And the supervisor knowing, great, it's those moments of truth which you can't control if you aren't sending messages to people so that they feel safe doing what's right in that moment in terms of taking care of that person. So thanks for taking your time and giving so much. And I know what you want to say, which is thanks to all the great people at Synchrony, who are doing, what they're doing every day. And we know that it's happening. It's a salute to what all of you are doing. And we have a lot of people on the webinar. We actually collect people who are pretty much into people. So, but you gave all of us, something to sharpen our pencil and say, oh, we should be doing that. Oh, every week by video. Leaders also doing the direct communication. We all, I think, have a list now to kind of keep us going. Also, your thing about talking about a year from now, so it's a long game here. It's a long game. So let's think about it that way and make sure that we're carrying all along the way. So thanks to your time, and congratulations for what you've accomplished at Synchrony and what you're doing. And thanks for, doing it in a way that your business is strong, you're taking care of people and moving through the world in a way that makes the world better.
Can I do one shout out? So I don't know if you know this, Michael, we got our Great Places to Work results in the Philippines last evening, and we're #1.
Yeah, I happen to know.
So I have to give the shout out to my team in the Philippines. They are like just walking on water and air. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And the idea of having a call center and getting everybody at home, in the Philippines, which very few people did that well.
Yes.
So that's off to you, and obviously your leaders and your people leaders who are taking care of all those people in the Philippines. I hope they're hearing this and inspired by it, and we're happy to have them on our list.
Great. I'm thrilled. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right, everyone. Sign off. We'll see you. Claire, your final comments?
Yeah, just on the more to come, and there's so many more questions we could have asked. It was such an engaging, inspiring time, Margaret, and I actually feel like I've gotten an energy boost, and I can see it coming through in the questions as well, the energy boost from listening to yourself and Michael today. So thank you so much. Today's recording and summary come early next week. We have our Together webinar every second Friday. At 9:30 Pacific, new content and discussion. We will have future C-suite leaders and best workplaces with us. Check us out on our Better Together page for what we're seeing and learning. And as always, send your questions to Michael_Bush at greatplacetowork.com. And thanks everybody for joining us today and taking an hour out to spend your time with us. We really appreciate everybody in our community. Stay well, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you again in two Fridays to come. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, Margaret. Bye-bye.